Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Radical Dreamer Steve back at you with another gaming video, and oh my god, finally, I am covering one of my favorite RPGs of all time, Shining Force 2. Let's just listen to this again. Okay, I think this is enough. Okay, Shining Force 2 was originally released on the Sega Genesis in 1994. And it was a vastly improved sequel over the original game. For me, this one is really special because this is the first, and I mean really, the first RPG I ever played. So, thanks John J5 Carini if you're listening. If not for you showing me this little game, perhaps I would just be making Mario and Kirby videos for the rest of my life. Anyway, this isn't really a review of Shining Force 2. Instead, much like the first game, I kind of want to look at what makes this game so timeless, what the legacy is, and talk about who will enjoy playing this in 2022. And starting off, we're going to talk about the exploration. So Shining Force 2 opens things right up and gives you an open world to explore. You are generally limited because of bodies of water and other obstacles, but exploration is far bigger than in Shining Force 1. And unlike the first game, there's not really a chapter system to block off areas once you move on later in the game. So what makes this so darn special is that when you explore, there's these hidden villages, areas, you can find some extra battles, and there's even some special items and hidden characters to find. I mean, the world really feels huge for a 16-bit RPG. And finally, just like I talked about with the first game, most strategy RPGs don't really offer exploration. You sort of just dabble in the menus, get to the next battle, and everything's very menu-driven. So Shining Force 2 still feels very fresh and ahead of its time even today. And when it comes to the story, unlike the first game, which was kind of stuck in Japan, the full story is intact here for Western audiences. Now, the story has different twists and turns, and the characters feel much more alive than the first game. For instance, there's side characters like Astral. He's like your teacher in the beginning of the game. He's kind of this crotchety old professor who's kind of angry at everything, but also very benevolent. There's Audler, the blind kid that you take with you, who ends up turning out to be one of the main baddies. And Zeon, the main baddie, actually, his facial portrait looks scary, and there's tons of scenes with him in the game where he kind of like, when he takes the gems from your main character. And these characters play a really meaningful role in the story. And a number of your characters in your party, like for instance, Peter and Lemon. Lemon was originally a bad guy. These guys are involved in the main plot. In Shining Force 1, none of the characters were really involved in the main plot. And even the characters that don't really have a lot of story, like, Slade or Kazin, they have smaller sub-stories when you get them that actually feel much more alive than the original game, and I would say even better than most of the Fire Emblem characters you get. So, Shining Force 2's story, isn't one of the best you're ever going to experience. Believe me, this isn't Lord of the Rings, but it did push forward the strategy RPG genre in meaningful ways, and it created really memorable characters. I think the coolest thing with Shining Force 2 that a lot of people overlook is this game has really, really complex lore. The world is falling apart, but it's got this kind of fantasy medieval setting. There's elves, there's humans, there's all these different classes. There's a lot of lore and world building in this game that is really, really neat to see, and really much, much more expanded than the first game. Okay, before actually getting to the gameplay, I do want to get to the Force. The Shining Force, what the whole game is named after. Yeah, you get it. Alright, so I just want to say this game is an amazing cast, and the characters seem much, much more balanced than the original game. Sure, yeah, you have some of those good-for-nothing characters like Screech and Guyan, and there's absolute tanks like Peter and Geralt, but most of the cast is pretty usable, and you can generally switch in and out characters kind of how you wish. Of course, if you don't put any mages in your party, you're going to be at a disadvantage. Stuff like that is RPG 101. But generally speaking, you could switch in and out party members and experiment, and I feel like you get the characters, most of the characters anyway, early enough in the game where there's still plenty of time to use them and train them. So it's really fun to play this game again and again and use a slightly different Force. Though Kiwi, I really like you, and it makes me so sad how pretty much any magic attack in the game kills you in one hit, but I still use you. Okay, moving on to the combat. So, I'm going to sort of talk with the AI and the battle speed first, because remember that awful AI from Shining Force 1? Well, somehow in literally just a year, at the snap of a finger, The developers literally pretty much 100% fixed the issue. This game actually requires strategy, and Bowie doesn't just have a giant target on his head, even when other characters are weaker and sitting ducks sitting right next to him. The AI is fairly competent and actually makes you think. Now, of course, you can still kind of do that classic strategy RPG strategy where you lure a few enemies towards your force at a time and take them out. That works in a lot of battles, but there's a lot of tough fights in this game, like the Kraken. That's a battle I'm at in my recent replay. That's a tough battle. When you first get to it, it seems like a giant spike in difficulty, and your typical strategy is not going to work in that battle. So there's a lot of different battles in this game with kind of unique scenarios and environments that really require you to use a lot of strategy. Another huge pro for Shining Force 2 is the battle speed. The cursor moves faster, the units move faster, the battle screens seemingly move faster, and unfortunately, you can't skip battle animations entirely, which is also a blessing because they're really beautiful and well done. But I think this game moves at a really good pace, even by modern standards, and I feel like this game has a certain cadence to it. Like when I was playing it, it seemed like all the actions, the music, the battles, everything had this sort of cadence and rhythm to it that I think a lot of other games lack. I guess my only complaint here is that the music restarts every single time the battle animations end, but seriously, that's just kind of crumbs on the counter, whatever. Moving on, I'm going to talk about the terrain, the strategy, and the variety. So Shining Force 2 has a ton of battles, and they're on all sorts of terrain. You're going to fight in temples, in towns, on the world map, in deserts, on grasslands, on a boat, on mountain paths, and there's just so many cool battles in this game. Now, not every single battle will feel totally unique from every other battle because there are quite a few that are just on the overall map, but there's easily enough variation to keep players interested until the end of the game. And this game is quite a bit harder than Shining Force 1, and I mean that in a good way. Whereas Shining Force 1, it felt like you just kind of pummeled everything because the AI was so stupid and you felt kind of over-leveled. In this game, you're going to really have to manage your roster and think about who you send in there. And I mean, it's obviously like if you go and send Kazin into the front lines by himself, he's going to die. Bye-bye Kazin. So you're going to have to really think about who you send forward. And on top of that, all the characters feel really unique. You're going to have to get to know who they are as characters. What's their movement range? What spells do they have? What are they strong against? And, you're going to have to find a way to use this force in conjunction with one another to win the battles. And I really feel like there's a lot of strategy in a lot of the battles in this game, especially since a lot of the battlefields are quite large. There's not just a narrow path you go through, though there are a few battles like that. So, there's a lot of strategies on how you want to split up your party into factions, or if you want to move them across the screen as a giant force, but you're still going to have to find kind of mini strategies within your overall larger strategies. And I'll just add in real quickly that, like the original game, you can always egress to escape a battle and grind levels. I do this quite often just to keep my characters up, especially a character like Sarah. I really want to use Sarah. I want her to be promoted. I don't want her to get 10 levels behind your other characters. So other than trying to let enemies with 1 HP be killed by mages and stuff, it's always a good idea to egress here and there and keep training your characters. Moving on to the promotion system. So Shining Force 2 totally revamped the promotion system. Any character can be promoted at level 20, and they do not grow weaker. They might go back to level 1, but they stay just as strong as they were, if not stronger. And what's really cool is a lot of the characters have different options for class promotions. Like Sarah, for instance. Sarah can be promoted into a vicar or vicar. I'm not sure how you say that. I'll say vicar. Sarah can be promoted into a vicar, but not a very good one at that. So players should use the vigor ball and turn it into a master monk, and a badass master monk at that. Yeah. I usually keep Sarah in the party, and I hear a lot of people say she's one of the worst characters in the game. No, she is not. Stop turning her into a damn vicar, and she will not be one of the worst characters in the game. Anyway, the promotion system rocks. There's even some special items you can find that turn certain characters into special classes, and it's just so much better done than Shining Force 1. Alright, so finally, what do I think the legacy of Shining Force 2 is? Well, Shining Force 2 is really the ultimate strategy game in the West on a 16-bit console. It literally improved over the original in every single way imaginable, and the Super Nintendo had no answer to it. The Genesis didn't have a better strategy RPG, and even as a big Fire Emblem fan, because I love the Fire Emblem games, I can honestly say I like Shining Force 2 more than any Fire Emblem game ever made. So, Shining Force 2 really paved the way for other strategy RPGs that had a larger emphasis on story, especially compared to other RPGs at that time, like in the early 90s, and the class system and sheer amount of world building was just astounding. The world in Shining Force 2 seems alive in a way that the original game just never ever accomplished, and Camelot, the developers of Shining Force, They would fully capitalize on this with Shining Force 3 and Golden Sun. Both of these games required multiple games to tell a complete story. While Shining Force 2 is just one game, the enemy design, character classes, villages, the demons, the expanded story, the staggeringly beautiful, mysterious world, all of this stuff just culminates into a really fun, gripping strategy RPG. To this day, most games have never bested Shining Force 2 when it comes to exploration, and somehow this game it's just so damn perfect. Like, I didn't even talk about the art style, but seriously, the art style is awesome. It has this kind of fantasy medieval look, sort of like the first game. I just feel like everything kind of looks a little upscaled in the second game. The characters look cooler, the graphics look nicer. And seriously, this game is just so much fun. So that sort of leads me to my final question for today, which is who will enjoy Shining Force 2? And the answer is anybody who appreciates strategy RPGs will like this game. It really is that simple. The fact of the matter is, as a total package, everything included, very few strategy RPGs come close to besting Shining Force 2, and debatably none of them do. I think this is a very legitimate pick for best strategy RPG of all time, even if it isn't mine. If it's not, it's really, really close. And the last thing I'll say about this game, since I just keep lathering it with praise, is it's very accessible and easy to pick up. You keep playing, you can pick up this game, just play it. It doesn't have a high learning curve, but at the same time, the exploration, the depth, the characters you can kind of switch in and out. There's easily 25 to 35 hours here of fun, and you can replay it and have a totally different experience with a different cast of characters. Okay, that was a mouthful. I would love to eventually talk to you guys about Shining Force 3 or Shining Force CD. I finally got to play Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 a few years back, and I really did love it. It's just such a fantastic game, like almost as good as Shining Force 2 in my opinion. But I've never played Shining Force CD, so perhaps I'll eventually play that and try to cover it for you guys. Sega, if you're listening, bring us a new Shining Force, please. I don't want Shining Sword, I don't want Shining Neo, I don't want Shining Soul, I don't want Shining in the Darkness or any other Shining except Shining Force. And I'm convinced many fans probably feel the exact same way. Well, that's going to be it for this week. Let me know, do you love Shining Force 2 as much as I do? Do you agree that it beats the original? And who was your favorite member of the Force? Since I didn't get to tell you, mine is probably Peter. It's an easy pick, I know, but he's so fantastic, and I like that there's finally a strong Birdman. But Kiwi and Sarah I really like as well. Anyway, take care, game on, and see you next time.